Welcome to today's Explainer. We're skipping the usual intro today and jumping right into a shocking contradiction that sits at the absolute peak of technological innovation. You know, we usually associate massive breakthroughs and patents with celebration, wealth, and profound joy, right? But what happens when achieving the ultimate professional milestone actually triggers immense grief? Today, we're unpacking a deeply human story that is completely tangled up in high-stakes mathematics. So let's dive into this incredibly raw assertion from Kyle McLean-Smith. This is a direct quote from our source material, spoken shortly after he secured a massive, life-changing U.S. patent. It's a stunning admission when you really think about it. Here is an innovator who essentially reached the mountaintop, only to find that the very act of succeeding has become physically and emotionally painful. He admits he actually began to shy away from success just because of the toll it takes on him. And this brilliantly illustrates our core mystery for today. Why would the ultimate professional triumph force a brilliant creator to actively avoid future success? How does a landmark patent transform from a crowning achievement into a prison of isolation? Well, to understand this, we have to look closely at what he built and, honestly, more importantly, exactly who he was building it for. Section 1. The paradox of success. The sheer scale of this achievement is massive. We're not talking about a minor software update or a simple app here. Under U.S. Patent 126644142, Kyle categorizes his hierarchical script database as essentially the first instance of artificial life in history. He calls it digital DNA replication. He envisioned this as a profound mathematical breakthrough designed to completely rethink how computer networks function at their most fundamental level. But the crucial point is that Kyle didn't endure years of grueling research, what was essentially a home-brewed PhD for corporate glory. He wasn't building this just to hand it over to massive tech conglomerates. He did it to provide for his wife, Emily, and the children they planned to have. His entire technological architecture was intrinsically tied to his family. It was meant to be their legacy. The heartbreaking anchor of this paradox is this. Because his family unit fell apart during this high-stakes process, his professional milestone became nothing but a forensic reminder of the family he lost along the way. Every single time this technology hits a milestone, it just acts as a glaring spotlight on the empty chairs at his dinner table. It is literally the ultimate burden of success. Section 2. Building digital DNA. To truly grasp the stakes of this paradox, we need to look at the contrast in the underlying technology that triggered this crisis in the first place. Modern computers largely rely on floating point units. Basically, to move fast, they use mathematical approximations. They guess. Kyle's technology completely bypasses that. He built a completely deterministic system. It relies on absolute forensic accuracy and geometric truths. Zero guessing. And in fields like global finance, eliminating that guesswork is the holy grail. He pulled off this forensic certainty by reaching back into deep mathematical foundations. We're talking about applying the Fibonacci sequence, Pythagorean theorems, and the metallic mean family directly into computer architecture. By aligning computer code with these absolute geometric truths, he claims to have solved major vulnerabilities in global financial ledgers. It's a stunning display of pure logic. But here's the catch, and really the catalyst for his nightmare. The sources outline a classic black swan pattern. Because his discovery was so perfect, so paradigm-shifting, he was no longer just viewed as a tech pioneer. He became a highly valuable and therefore highly vulnerable geopolitical asset. He harbors deep suspicions that the immense external pressure surrounding his intellectual property led to his family being weaponized as leverage against him. Section 3. The modern outlaw. That immense external pressure brings us to a terrifying systemic context. The modern outlaw. We aren't talking about a criminal here. We're talking about a citizen who has been effectively denied access to justice and legal representation, existing entirely outside the system's protections. Imagine being completely locked out of the state's legal shield, leaving you entirely defenseless against systemic pressures, without ever having broken a single law. The isolation is so absolute that Kyle uses a vivid pop culture metaphor to describe it. He calls his life a survivalist, John Wick kind of existence, even referring to himself as a political refugee within his own life. It perfectly captures that drastic, completely unwanted shift from being a creator of beautiful mathematics to waging a desperate defensive war just to survive the systematic dismantling of his marriage and his life's work. And this happens through a cascading bureaucratic failure. In month 1, he hires a lawyer, completely standard procedure. By month 2, he is inexplicably dropped. Over the next several months, he's on a desperate search for representation, and by month 7, he's forced to represent himself in complex litigation. His rights were effectively erased in less than a year. 200. That is exactly how many lawyers Kyle reached out to during those middle months. He offered to pay by credit card, he just wanted basic legal shielding. But out of 200 professionals, he experienced absolutely zero success. He was entirely locked out. Without a lawyer, the everyday mechanics of untangling a bonded life become incredibly dangerous and costly. The financial lengths required to navigate the system as an outlaw are just devastating. Kyle actually had to fire sale a condo for just $10,000, simply to safely facilitate handing over his part of an asset to his mother-in-law, all because he had no formal legal advocate to handle it safely. Based on these brutal experiences, Kyle frames what he calls the divorce industrial complex. He argues that modern family law operates as a profit-driven ecosystem that drains resources from vulnerable individuals. Because it relies heavily on subjective rulings rather than objective, verifiable mechanics like his code does, it creates a space where bad actors can exploit innovators and their families completely unchecked. Which brings us to a vital, universal question that pivots us from Kyle's micro-level trauma to a massive societal blind spot. When someone is screaming that their life is being dismantled, when they are locked out and suffering this deeply, why does society simply turn away from that raw pain?
Section 4, an ecosystem of avoidance.
As a colleague of his insightfully notes in the source material, it's very hard for people to stay with someone else's pain. It's actually an involuntary psychological reflex. When we're confronted with the chaotic, unfiltered, loud distress of someone who has lost everything, it hurts to watch. So our brains instinctively try to escape. We disengage to protect ourselves. The crucial point here is that this natural instinct to look away actively constructs what is termed an ecosystem of avoidance. Because manipulative systems thrive on cold, sterile optics, Kyle's messy, raw cries for help are marginalized. Society's inability to witness pain creates a dark, unchecked environment where the coercion of innovators can happen right under our noses.
Section 5, pathways to healing.
Despite this incredibly grim picture of systemic failure, this source material does offer concrete frameworks for rebuilding. First, Kyle's philosophy insists we must address the personal estate, meaning we have to prioritize the family and the human element first. Next, he advocates for replacing our standard legal models with formal witness and reconciliation commissions. This is a system designed specifically to force institutions to actively witness and genuinely process the trauma they inflict, rather than just sweeping it under the rug. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. As we march toward a future built on digital DNA and deterministic math, true progress isn't just about securing technological patents. It's about whether our society has the courage to stop looking away. Are we willing to dismantle this ecosystem of avoidance, or will we just stand by while our greatest innovations cost our creators absolutely everything? Think about that next time you marvel at a technological breakthrough. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the systems around you.